So, coming back after a month away, the first thing you often notice is the noise. When you're inside the daily news cycle, you just hear the volume. But when you step out and come back, you start to see the pattern. And right now, the pattern feels inevitable. We see a headline from the White House. We already know, down to the exact phrasing, what the opposition will say. We know how the media will frame it. We know exactly how the regime will use the backlash to justify the next thing they do. It feels like we're in a car with no steering wheel and the only pedal anyone can find is the gas. So the media calls this polarization, but I don't like that word. Polarization implies we're just drifting apart, like two continents separating, and that's passive. And that's not what this is. What we're experiencing is something active. It's a mechanism. To understand it, we have to get out of politics entirely. We need to go back to the year 1936. And I'm choosing that year for a reason. It was the year a British anthropologist named Gregory Bateson published a book called Naven. But it was also the year the world was spiraling toward World War II. And Bateson looked at the world around him and he realized that societies don't just fight. They fall into mathematical patterns of escalation. And he coined a term for that, schismogenesis. So if we break that down, right, we have schismo, split, genesis, creation, and the creation of division. But here's the genius part. Bateson realized that division isn't a static thing. It's a feedback loop. It's a dynamic system where the behavior of group A drives the behavior of group B, which then loops back to drive group A. So he identified two types of these loops. And if you understand the difference between them, you understand the entire history of the 20th century and the danger we're in right now. So the first is complementary. This is based on difference, dominance, and submission. The more bossy the leader gets, the more submissive the follower becomes, so they fit together. It's not healthy, but it's stable. But the second type is the killer, symmetrical schismogenesis. And this isn't about difference, it's about sameness, it's about rivalry. In a symmetrical loop, both sides are doing the same thing, just trying to outdo the other. Side A shouts, Side B shouts louder to be heard. Side A feels drowned out, so they buy a megaphone. Side B sees the megaphone, feels an existential threat, and buys a stadium sound system, right? It's the Cold War arms race. It's the blood feuds in Romeo and Juliet. And the terrifying thing about a symmetrical loop is that it destroys nuance. There's no room for a middle volume in a shouting match. You're either escalating or you're losing. So if we look at the United States right now, we're in a deep symmetrical death spiral. This brings us to the most difficult part of the analysis, because when we apply an academic framework like this to real life, we risk sterilizing the danger. We risk acting like this is just a game of systems when it isn't. When the regime enacts immigration policies that separate families or rewrites the tax code to enforce religious compliance or guts the safety net to target specific groups, that's not politics. That's a dismantling of democracy, where we are compelled morally and existentially to fight that. But that's exactly where the trap lies. The current regime operates on symmetrical schismogenesis. They know that when they bury a cruelty inside a policy, the moral class must react. We have to. It's in our DNA to defend human rights. So we react with maximum outrage. We mobilize. We scream fascist because it's true. But in a symmetrical loop, the truth doesn't matter. Only the reaction matters. By forcing us to fight for basic humanity, they pull us out of the realm of law where they are vulnerable and drag us into a raw power struggle where they're strong. So they point to our outrage and use it as propaganda. They tell their base, look how hysterical they are. They don't care about family values. They just hate you. They use our necessary righteous defense of humanity as the fuel to justify their next escalation. So is it hopeless? Are we just going to vibrate until the machine explodes? Bateson didn't think so. He argued there's only one way to stop a symmetrical loop without a total collapse, and that's the introduction of a third factor. So a third factor is something that refuses to fit into the binary of attack versus attack. It breaks the rhythm. And I think for us that looks like three specific things. First, we need to shift from playing the game to documenting the crime. And this is the hardest pill to swallow. We're watching a regime that has captured the courts, intimidated the press, and terrified the opposition lawmakers into silence. And the standard checks and balances aren't checking or balancing anything right now. So simply exposing a scandal doesn't stop them. They don't have shame. But we don't expose the mechanics to stop them today. We do it to build the record for tomorrow. When we dig into the fine print of the budget to show exactly how they're hurting people, we aren't just trying to win a news cycle. We're creating the evidentiary record that denies them the ability to lie about history later. We stop screaming, "You're evil," and start showing this is exactly how you broke the law. We have to become the archivist of their corruption, even when the courts refuse to act. Second, we need to understand the difference between venting and mobilizing. The regime loves it when we vent. They love the chaotic, hair-on-fire social media explosion. They can package that chaos, put it on a screen, and use it to justify a crackdown. Venting is symmetrical. It's just noise meeting noise. Mobilization is different. Mobilization is the civil rights movement. It's the suffragettes. It is disciplined, organized, and terrifyingly quiet until it strikes. It isn't a riot, it's a boycott. It isn't a tweet, it's a general strike. The third factor here is discipline. If we give them chaos, they will use it to demand order. But if we give them a wall of disciplined, unified refusal, they don't have a playbook for that. And finally, the third piece, the anthropological defense. Bateson observed that when a society starts to fracture, the most dangerous thing you can do is become isolated. The regime wants you to feel alone. They want you to feel like your neighbors are your enemies. The third factor is the refusal to break. It means we strengthen our own networks. We support our own media. We protect our own vulnerable. We don't wait for the state to save us. We save each other. And this is the hardest path. It requires endurance. It requires us to be smarter than our anger. But looking back at 1936, we have one advantage they didn't have. We know how the story ends if we don't intervene. Bateson's theory was a warning, not a prophecy. The loop is strong, but we're stronger, and it's time to break it. You guys have an awesome day. See you soon.